we're going to start with the sauce. Now, whenever I use cashews or any form of a nut, it's always a raw nut. It's never that thing that comes in the little blue container, right? It's always the raw nut. So in this instance, it is a raw cashew. This raw cashew has already been washed and dried. Anytime you're dealing with raw cashews, you want to wash them, okay? There's a substance on the outside of a raw cashew that can be irritating for many people, okay? So always, always, always wash your raw cashews. So since these are already washed, I'm simply going to measure them out. Let me hold this for me if you don't mind. Thank you. I'm going to just measure them out without washing them because I already did that. And I will also say that I don't normally use whole cashews. I normally use cashew pieces because they're cheaper, to be frank. But when I went to buy cashews, they were out of the pieces. All they had were the whole. So I am using whole, but it's going to all get whizzed up. I don't need a fancy cashew to make sauce out of, right? I'm using fancy cashews tonight because that's what I have available to me. But otherwise, it would just be the regular cashew pieces. So we use 1.5 cups of cashews, a clove of garlic, which is still sitting in my freezer at home. Thank you. Okay, so we've got our cashews. We're going to pretend that we have our garlic. For those of you who've been here before, you've heard me say this, but for the benefit of those of you who haven't, I buy my garlic. I always use fresh garlic. The stuff that you buy in the little jars packed in the water has no taste at all. It serves no meaningful purpose in your recipes. I buy bulk fresh garlic. I put it either in a blender or a food processor, and I mince it down. I then scrape it out, scrape it into ice cube trays, and stick it in my freezer. So when I need garlic, I just simply pop out a cube of garlic. Now, for me, a little bit of garlic is good, and a whole lot of garlic is even better. So I tend to use the whole cube of garlic in many of my dishes. But sometimes I don't need a whole cube. I might cut the cube in half. But there's a cheat for you to be able to have that fresh garlic taste that you can't get from the jars that we buy in the grocery store. So we'll just pretend that I flipped my cube of garlic in there. It calls for 2 teaspoons of coriander, and I'm super excited to try this coriander because I haven't yet. And it calls for 4 tablespoons of lemon juice. I did squeeze this earlier today. And I do like to use fresh lemon juice in this recipe and in most sauce recipes. I do keep a bottle of lemon juice in my refrigerator, the bottle of lemon juice that you can buy. And there are a few recipes that I do use that for. But for something raw, I find that the fresh lemon juice is a much superior taste, okay? So we've got our 4 tablespoons of lemon juice, 1/2 cup of water, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. It's hard to get easier than that. I do use the pink Himalayan salt, and why would I do that, Dr. Howe?
Because you're a woman.
It's true, I like pink. Why else would I do that?
Because it's a complete salt. It has multiple minerals in it in addition to sodium chloride. And complete salts raise your blood pressure slightly less than the refined salt, which is just sodium chloride. One thing you need to be aware of if you use them exclusively is you may develop an iodine deficiency. That can happen is they're not iodinized, but you can fix that problem by eating seaweed, and we have a lot of it around here.
Okay, This happens to be a Schwanky blender. You don't have to have a fancy blender. Just a regular Walmart blender or Target blender, whatever you have at home is fine. You're just going to whiz it down until it's creamy. And that's the mistake that a lot of people make when they're working with raw nuts to make a cream-based sauce, is they don't whiz it enough. And then it comes out and it's grainy and it's like you're eating sand, and that's gross. All right? So you're just going to whiz this until it's creamy. And that's all there is to it. Done. So that's your sauce. And this can be used for the sauce for this, for a dip, in the place of mayonnaise, as a drizzle on like a taco, or any of that kind of stuff. Very, very, very nice. But the key is to blend it until it's smooth. All right? Now, you can add other flavorings to this. This happens to be lemon. But if you wanted some sort of creamy sauce, say an alternative to sour cream, you could do the same thing, but instead of using lemon, you would use lime. All right? Say in a Mexican dish. So that's the sauce that we're going to use. Now, on to the broccoli salad. So I cheated, because this is what I do for my family, so this is what I'm doing for you. It calls for basically 2 heads of broccoli, all right? Well, the broccoli that I find right now in the grocery store is picked in some foreign place, far, far, far away, and shipped here, because it's really hard to find fresh broccoli in Maine at this time of year, right? So I'm using frozen broccoli. I simply let it thaw out. All right, now I'm feeling that I didn't take it out of the freezer quite early enough. Fortunately for you, yours was taken out earlier. This is 1 pound of broccoli, all right? So I would actually, for my family, use 2 of these. I would use 2 pounds of broccoli for this purpose. And then you're just gonna take it and you're gonna cut it into smaller pieces. It's faster than dealing with the fresh. If we have fresh, locally grown, that's amazing and that's terrific. But if we don't, then I will often use frozen broccoli. Just let it defrost, and it's very nice. In fact, it's a little bit less crunchy, but it's still quite crunchy than, compared to what you would typically get in a fresh broccoli. So we're just going to chop this up into smaller bite-sized pieces, or slightly smaller than bite-sized pieces. I won't bore you with continuing to do that, but you get the idea. And then from there, we're going to add our nuts and our seasonings. So we're going to add 1/4 cup of pumpkin seeds. These are raw seeds. 1/4 cup of pumpkin seeds, 1/4 cup of sunflower seeds, 1/4 cup of dried cranberries. I do like to find the dried cranberries that don't have sugar on them, that are just straight up dried cranberries. It used to be easily found in the health food section of Hannaford. And now that they've married all of the health food into the regular food, it's sometimes a little bit harder to find. I do find it more often at the Topsom Hannaford than at the Brunswick Hannaford, for whatever reason. So we've got our pumpkin seeds, our sunflower seeds. We need slivered almonds. And it's not on your recipe and it's not required, but I often add about 1/4 to 1/2 cup of parsley. I do like the curly parsley as opposed to the flat leaf parsley in this particular dish, because the curly leaf parsley doesn't have quite as sharp of a flavor as the flat leaf parsley. Your flat leaf has a stronger flavor. This still is parsley, but it doesn't have quite the punch that the flat leaf does. Just chop it up. I typically use a chef's knife, and I would get this a little bit finer. But there you go. It's a pretty dish in a white bowl. It's very green. And there's two ways of handling the sauce. If you want to be pretty and schwanky, then you drizzle it over the salad and you put it in the middle of your plate, and it's lovely. I don't do that. I just pour the sauce in and I stir it up because my family's not going to wait around for the pretty stuff, you know. If I'm having people over and it's a nice occasion, we're going to make it real pretty. But otherwise, pour it in, mix it up, and serve it, and they love it. All right, any questions about that? Yes, sir?
Have you ever tried the dressing with the chili?
I have, and I do like to chop up a little bit of a chili in there. I did not do that tonight because a lot of people aren't fans of that, but I do add a little bit chili, particularly if I am if I'm having a more plain entree and I want a side dish that has a little more zip to it, or if I'm using this sauce with a more ethnic type of food, say Mexican food or Thai food, something where a little bit of zip is helpful. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm assuming the pumpkin seeds and almonds are the unsalted kind.
Correct, they're raw, completely raw.